Lavenda takes us in a new direction with Shadow People. Jason Offutt's been on Coast, but you've never heard quite what you're going to hear on this program as our conspiracy expert dives into this with David in a whole new way, talking about darkness walks the shadow people among us. Time is running out. If you're going to go to the Dreamland Stargate, you'd better get your tickets now because it's just about gonna be next week, and I am pumped. I'm telling you, William Henry, me, and Starfire, the Skywatch, we are going to have something happening out there that I think is going to be unlike anything that's ever happened before in this area, because this is real. This is all real. There are changes taking place both in the world around us and within us. All you have to do is look in and look up with an open mind, and you cannot deny it. It is happening. So do get your tickets if you're going to come. And if you live anywhere on the West Coast, you can drive there. Even from Phoenix, it's not a difficult drive. So take a look at the Dreamland Stargate Experience on the UnknownCountry.com store and get yourself there. Learning Starfire's information firsthand changed me profoundly, and I think it can change other people too. Plus, William has been working on a way of actually understanding how we can get the energy to become a Stargate ourselves. It may sound impossible. Little me, how can I do that? It's not impossible. Little you is much bigger than you think. Plus, Anne is going to take us into a whole new direction. Why do the visitors so often show up with dead people in their presence? Well, there is an answer to that, and the answer lies in the direction of the fact that we don't or did not know how the living and the dead actually are in synergy together. There is no barrier among the visitors between the living and the dead. When we come out of that experience, a lot of us are going to hopefully be going in that direction, end the barrier between the living and the dead. Now, who are these shadow people? You've heard this discussed on Coast. You've heard Jason talk about it on Coast, but you have never heard what he's going to say. Unknown Country subscribers, now is the time. The rubber has met the road. It's October the 10th. Next weekend, the Dreamland Stargate with me, Ann Strieber, Starfire Tour, William Henry, and a Skywatch at Joshua Tree, California. Don't miss it. If you're going to come, get your tickets and reservations right now.
Thanks very much, Whitley. I'm very pleased to be part of the Dreamland team, and I can think of no better way to start that off than by introducing our first guest, or my first guest, Jason Offutt. This is a book called Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us, and it's very spooky. Jason, hello, how are you?
Hello, and it's Offutt.
Offutt, okay, sorry, yes.
It's okay, nobody ever gets it right.
Okay, Offutt, I got it. Okay, as I say, I'm very pleased to be part of the Dreamland team, but I'm also very pleased to be interviewing you, Jason, about this book. It's strange. I mean, we've read about a lot of things. We've talked about a lot of things on Dreamland and on other interviews and other programs about various types of, alien abductions and demonic possession and that sort of thing. I have to tell you, I was totally unaware that there was this whole culture called the Shadow People. This is something that is new to me, that it's an actual subsect or set of paranormal experience. And maybe you could just tell us just a little bit about it. I know you had a childhood experience that sort of set you off in this direction. Maybe you would like to tell people a little bit about that.
Okay, yes, and Shadow People, as a paranormal phenomenon, it's been out in the public, didn't really get out there until the mid to late 1990s. So it is relatively new for the larger listening audience. But when I was a kid back in the early to mid 70s, I was about 8-9 years old, something like that. And I grew up on a farm. So our farmhouse was in the middle of nowhere, and we could keep the windows open all night because we didn't really have to worry about anything. And I would see in a fairly well lit room, and by well lit I mean the moonlight turned everything gray, and I could make out my bookshelf and my desk and all of that. And I would see these two-dimensional, much blacker than the night around them, very tall, human-shaped shadows walk through my room. They walked from one corner specifically right by my bed, very uncomfortably by my bed, and out into the hallway. They never took notice of me, fortunately. I don't know how scared I would have been if they had. They just seemed to be going from point A to point B, and it just happened to be right through my room. And this type of encounter I found during my research is one of the most common.
Did this happen frequently, or was this a one-time thing? Or
no, this happened during a couple-of-year period. This would happen as often as 7 days in a row to once every 2 months. It was sporadic when it happened, but I think probably between that 2-year period, I may have seen them 24 times.
How old were you? Do you roughly?
I was about 8 or 9 years old.
So this must have really frightened you. I mean, this has to be an extremely unsettling experience.
Yes, absolutely it did. Because I had no idea what to make of them, and I would call for my parents. They would reluctantly get out of bed, come into my room, turn the lights on, and there'd be absolutely nothing there. So I was the only person in a house with 5 people who was seeing these things. And I didn't once think that it was my imagination, because these things were so real to me that I knew I was seeing something. I just couldn't convince people I was seeing them.
And there was no communication with them. There was no exchange of any kind of information between you and these shadow people.
No. Again, like I said, they were seemingly oblivious to me being in the room.
Right. That is bizarre. But would they always start in the same part of the room and proceed to the other side, or was it random? Or
no, they would always start from one side, from one corner, and walk, like I said, right by my bed and out into the hallway. And I did try and find as many terrestrial explanations of this as I possibly could. And on nights when I didn't see them, I would try and figure out why I was or why I wasn't. And I could never find any reason other than I was seeing shadow people.
Wow. Okay. You were awake during this time. This wasn't a case of what psychologists call night terrors. You were wide awake. This was after you had fallen asleep. Were you awakened by this, or were you hadn't gone to sleep yet? You hadn't fallen asleep.
No night terrors, sleep paralysis, anything like that, because I just turned the lights off and laid down in bed. I had the habit as a kid. My parents wanted me to go to bed at a specific time, and to show them that I was not going to go to bed at a specific time, I would lay there awake for a while, sometimes listening to the radio or doing whatever. But I was always awake. This was always before I went to sleep.
Now, in your book, you talk about your own experience, but for the most part, you cite, I would say, dozens, maybe more than 50 different people who've had these experiences, and they all seem to be alike in one respect. These things that you see, the shadow people, you can't really discern facial features, can you?
No, the only features that can be determined on these things are if they appear to be wearing clothing or not, or the fact that they've got 2 arms and 2 legs. Sometimes fingers. People can see that much definition, but never facial features.
So the fascinating thing to me is that these are humanoid or human-type creatures. I mean, they look like us in silhouette, basically. Correct.
But the one exception to that is they look like they almost look like us. There's in all of the cases that I've reported in the book, and my personal one is there's just something a little bit different about them. They're not exactly a carbon copy of a human. They may be 7 foot tall. Their arms may be a little bit too long. Their head may be a little bit bigger for their body than what a normal human's would be. There's always something that's just a little bit off.
Right. And their motions, their movements are not quite fluid human motions. Am I correct?
Right. The motions are a little bit jerky, like bad stop and go animation.
Right. Okay. So now, in your book, you talk about most people have bad reactions towards this. I mean, they're terrified by this experience. Would you say that in general, the reaction is a negative one?
In almost every single case, it's been negative from extremes. In my case, I was scared, but it was just the fact that I was seeing these human-shaped things walking through my room, and I was afraid like anybody would be. But there are people who feel a terror, an unnatural terror from these creatures, like the creatures are placing this terror inside them. These types of shadow people who elicit this type of feeling are always ones that take notice of the person in the room. They will look directly at them. They will react if the other person moves. I've had it described as the terror. It makes people feel like the shadow people are feeding off of this negative energy that they're creating inside people. So there are a bunch of different categories of shadow people, and fortunately, this is not one that I encountered.
Right. You mentioned all of the various types of entities, types of shadow people, which we'll get into in the next segment, which will start a little bit. But it sounds from what you're saying that at times there's a kind of vampiric nature to them, that, as you just mentioned, they're feeding off of your own terror. Somehow it causes them to get stronger.
Right, and like I said, there have been a lot of cases on that, and it's generally the certain types of shadow people with certain physical traits that are this type of shadow people, and like I said, we will discuss the different types. I guess in the next segment.
Yeah, when we get back, I'd like to talk about that, and I'd also like to talk a little bit about how, in so many cases, or in a handful of cases anyway, people have actually caused them to show up using a Ouija board or some other means. I'd like to get back into that. What we're doing is we're talking to Jason Offutt. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Offutt?
Yes.
Okay, great. The author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. This is Peter Levenda for Dreamland, and we'll be right back.
Dreamland subscribers, don't miss the live chat with Whitley and Ann Strieber in the Unknown Country chat room next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time.
And we are back with Jason Offutt, the author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. As I say, Jason, I found this to be a fascinating topic because I had not been aware of it, quite frankly. I mean, I've been aware of hauntings and possessions and alien visitations and all this other stuff that is so much part of the literature, but to come across something like this was an eye-opener towards me. And not only is there this genre of experience called the shadow people, but you've broken it down into different types of shadow people: the benign shadows, the negative, the red-eyed, the buzzing, the angry, hooded shadows, and the shadows that attack, and even the Hat Man. Can you tell us a little bit about these different types of entities? I mean, how they break down?
Yeah, well, and when I started on this, I knew of the type that I had encountered, the benign shadows, that I call them. Benign because they never did anything to me except for walk through my room. But I noticed as I interviewed people who have experienced shadow people, certain characteristics of shadow people and behaviors they corresponded. There is one specific entity that has red glowing eyes, which would frankly terrify me. These are always negative. These are the ones that elicit the terror, the unnatural terror in people, and people feel they're feeding off of them. They feel that these creatures are evil. These things appear threatening, not just their how their appearance and the feeling, but sometimes how they act. I mean, there was a woman I spoke with who one night she got up to use the restroom. She was like 8 months pregnant, and a door to the bathroom faced, when you were in your bathroom, you faced the hallway, and she saw one of these creatures staring at her, and then it started walking toward her, and she was trapped in this little room all by herself. That sort of stalking behavior is generally only for the red-eyed types of shadows. The Hat Man is another one that you mentioned. This is an absolutely fascinating one because it appears to wear a fedora. I've talked to a number of different people who've encountered a hat man who's worn a derby or another type of old-fashioned hat, but these tend to act more like ghostly encounters than shadow people encounters. Hat men take notice of people in their homes or passing them on the street at night. They tend to notice you. They don't necessarily scare you. They just are paying attention to you, which frankly is scary enough. The buzzing shadows emit a noise that sounds like you're walking too close to a power station or bees buzzing. The people I've interviewed have felt this is some sort of communication with the shadow people. This has also been. Some people think that the buzzing shadow people could be interdimensional travelers. There's not just one explanation for what these creatures could be.
Well, the odd thing to me is that there seems to be no rhyme or reason to their existence. It's not as if they're trying to tell us something. From what I gather from your book, there doesn't seem to be any desire on the part of these entities to communicate or to do something other than a negative thing, which is to scare the hell out of you. And but past that, there doesn't seem to be anything more there, is there? Or am I wrong?
Other than feeding off the fear, or in the case of the ones that I saw, and other people have seen the same thing. They've gotten the impression that these things are just going from point A to point B, and right through our house or right through our lives is where their highway is, and we just happen to be able to see them. But do they want anything from us other than to feed from us, other than to terrify us? It doesn't seem so.
I've noticed in your book too that, as I mentioned before, there's a Ouija board connection. It seems to be that people become sensitized to this. Well, I'm speculating here. Maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't know if they're being sensitized to this experience or they're creating this experience, creating a means for these creatures to enter by using paranormal communication methods such as the Ouija board. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or what people have told you about that?
Well, it's just the Ouija board experiences are the ones I had the most of, but it could be any other type of invitation, a seance, automatic writing, any time when you are inviting something from the other side to communicate with you. A lot of times they will come, and a number of occurrences in the book are shadow people that have answered the invitation and have followed people around for a while just because they become attached to them. I've had a number of cases where shadow people seem to be attached to certain people and will follow them around. And a lot of times with something like a Ouija board, it seems like that this is what happens to them. Yeah. Hey, come join the party, and then they never leave.
Well, but that sets up a whole bunch of questions in my mind. At one point we're talking about them sort of passing through, as you said, as if our world is a kind of highway that they're walking down or traveling through, and then suddenly there is this option, there is this possibility that you can initiate contact with the shadow people where there haven't been any before. You can start it going, and then suddenly you're stuck with this entity that now seems to be attached to you in some way. I mean, it's unusual. I mean, it's from a Christian point of view, you might say these are demonic types, as you mentioned in your book. They could be, ghosts. They could be spiritual forces, but their characteristics are so unique that it kind of puts them outside that normal framework, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, yes, it does. But it also, to me, the basic opinion that I've gotten through researching and writing the book is that these entities are different. There are different specific types of entities. Some behave demonically. Some don't. And there's a myriad of ones in between. I think that there are different explanations for some. Some are ghosts. Some could be an image we're seeing of people astral projecting. Some could very well be demonic entities, judging from the way a lot of a lot of these creatures act, yes, they probably are. So just by saying shadow people, that is the basic description, but I think there are a lot of different things.
Well, one of the anecdotes you mentioned in your book, which has kind of stuck with me for a while. You had one researcher in Moundsville, West Virginia. I believe she was a paranormal researcher going through the penitentiary there. And I've written about that particular building in a different context. I think Squeaky Frumy was there. The lady tried to kill Gerald Ford, member of the Manson family. And because of Moundsville, there are the Indian burial mounds there, which will be a topic of another Dreamland sometime down the pike. But so you have the burial mounds. You have all of this taking place, and then you have a researcher going through a disused structure at the penitentiary in West Virginia, seeing one of these shadow people shining a flashlight on it, and then it reacts to the light. I mean, it holds an arm up to its face. It appears to be looking at the light on the shadow person itself. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? I mean, she took a photograph, I believe, didn't she?
Right.
Or tried to.
She tried to, and yes, that was a fascinating story that I got from her. Her and her team were investigating, and she was down a hallway by herself, and she noticed this shadow person walking down the hall. She said it looked a lot like maybe she thought it was a ghost of a guard, still doing his rounds down the hall. But she also said that when it noticed her, it appeared two-dimensional, and it like peeled itself off the wall like it was a sticker. And when she shined the light on it, yes, it hit its arm, and it reacted to the light hitting the arm. She felt maybe the light was doing it a little bit of damage by the way it reacted, and scampered away.
Well, that's just very strange. I mean, suddenly we have now another level of contact, if you will, between us and them. A level of contact in which they're reacting to the light. They are sort of playing hide and seek. I mean, in this case, the entity disappeared behind a door and then poked itself back out again, took another look, it seems, reacted to the sound of her camera turning on. So sensitive to light, sensitive to sound, acknowledging the presence of the other person. I think a lot of ghostly encounters don't have this high degree of contact between both sides.
Right, I would have to agree with the ghostly encounters. You may have most of the interaction that I've been able to catalog that ghosts will interact with people are generally through EVPs and not something you can see, like the way the shadow person behaved. So, right. Well, what was it? Was it a ghost? It was not behaving like one. It could be, in any of the number of other explanations for them. It could be something that I haven't even thought of yet.
Right, but for years you've been researching this and collecting all this data, and it's fascinating to me. You've tried to do a kind of statistical analysis of it, as to what people think they are, what they may be. Actually, you think that most people that responded to you think that they're from different dimensions. Is that correct?
That overwhelmingly, and that's the one explanation. One of the things that I tried to do is with every explanation find some experts to talk to about this, and I spoke with physicists and psychologists, biological chemists, all from people from various religious disciplines, Native Americans, to try and find some, what these things could be, and I got different things from everybody.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back. We're going to take a little break right now, but this is Peter Levenda for Dreamland talking to Jason Offutt about his book Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland Online.
And we're back with Jason Offutt, Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. I'm Peter Levenda for Dreamland. Jason, just before the break, we were talking about, you've talked to a lot of different experts, a lot of different sources and authorities on what this could be, and they range from the metaphysical to the physicists, virtually everyone in between. Yourself, you had a direct experience, an ongoing one for a while, and you've talked to a lot of other people and gotten a lot of other feedback. What is your personal feeling about these entities? what does your gut instinct tell you that about what they are, what they want, what they're doing?
Well, it depends on how they're acting. The overwhelming number of people I talked with had negative experiences, had experiences where they were, felt like they were being stalked or hunted or fed off. For the most of these encounters that I've documented, they seem demonic to me. By the way they're acting, or by the way they are preying off of people. I've had a couple of instances that were frankly terrifying. A girl, she was about 8, 9 years old, maybe 10. Whenever she walked by her mother's room, she would hear what she described as a heartbeat, and she would see this shadow person standing there staring at her. And one night when she went upstairs, everybody else was downstairs, it tried to drag her into the room. That doesn't sound like anything other than demonic. A woman in Australia was sexually assaulted by one of these creatures. I've talked to a number of people who've been chased by these things. So they're not all demonic, of course, but I think a vast number of them are. Enough of them are that anybody witnessing shadow people, I would urge caution.
Well, it sounds a little close in some cases to what we've heard about alien abduction, and on the other hand, it doesn't. I mean, it is and it isn't. I mean, there just isn't enough of a similarity, to my mind. It does seem that you might be on the right track, thinking it's demonic, and at the same time, you get this overwhelming response from people saying these are from other dimensions. So, it sounds silly, but is that how demonic forces operate? Are they forces from other dimensions? I mean, if you're going to take both of these things together, do you see where I'm going?
Right. Right.
What is your reaction? I mean, when you say demonic, is this in a classic Christian sense of demonic, or just evil entities, or do you know?
Well, I'm going with the classic Christian sense, mainly because something an exorcist, an archbishop I interviewed, said that really made an impact on me, was that these creatures are, as I mentioned, not entirely, created like a human. Their arms might be too long, or there's something that's not entirely human. And his explanation was that they can't be created in God's image, as the Bible says humans are. So, and since all these cases of shadow people have that description with them, that just made a pretty big impression on me. And besides the interdimensional, that makes a lot of sense to me. But you should have heard the physicist laugh when I brought that one up.
Well, yeah, I'm sure, and I think one thing we should point out, just for people listening who are wondering what this is all about too. Someone listening is going to think, well, someone's just having you on. People are making up stories and telling them to you. But as you go through the book, you can see that the accounts that are given, the anecdotal information that's given, they're not that wild in the sense that it's not somebody sitting down at their PC or their word processor coming up with some wild story to tell you. These are just mundane situations in which something this strange has taken place, totally out of context. I know the physicists argue with it, saying it can't be interdimensional. You begin your book talking about some of the physical explanations that have been offered and how the physicists, deny the possibility. A gas, for instance, as you mentioned in your book, can't turn a doorknob, can't
right.
poke somebody in the back. So the physicists are opting out of this discussion, I imagine.
Right. Well, they are, even though the physicists I interviewed are also ghost hunters.
Right.
So they've said, we want to scientifically prove this, and if anybody's going to have scientific proof, it's going to be us. But yeah, given the physical world and the way these things behave, they can't physically behave like this, and when it gets to the different dimensions, like I said, they were firmly against that. They referred to it as science fiction.
Right. So you're left now with a supernatural explanation because that's the only one you're left with, basically, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
Well, we talked about people opening up to them by using various paranormal means, such as the Ouija board and everything. How do you get rid of them if you encounter this kind of an experience, and especially if it's a recurring one? How do you get rid of it?
Well, and this is another point that makes me go for the demonic explanation for a number of these creatures, because people who've reported getting rid of them have invoked the name of Christ and they've left. But there have also been other people I've interviewed who just yelled or sang or laughed or put music on the radio, and these things have disappeared. So is it just a noise? Is it the name of Christ? I don't know. If I see them again, I'll invoke the name of Christ, because I might as well pull out the big guns instead of just singing or laughing.
Well, maybe they want to be the only emotional content in the room. It sounds like. I mean, if you're laughing, that sort of diminishes them. If you make any loud noise, turn on the radio, it's as if they get miffed that you're not paying attention to them, so they turn around and leave.
Right, or it's a couple of people taking swings at them. It's like a bully. If you punch it in the nose, it's gonna leave you alone. That's kind of what I've gathered.
I think this is just a fascinating subject. It's just it's got so much going for it because in a way it's ambiguous. On the other hand, it's a very definite thing. I mean, people who've had this experience are, definitely have had it, and there's just no getting around it, and it stays with them for the rest of their lives, I imagine. This one thing that happened to them that was so strange.
It was so powerful to me when I was young that it prompted me to research and finally write a book about it. One of the other things we've kind of alluded to but haven't really addressed specifically is the fact that the reports that I've gotten haven't just been from the United States. They've been from Canada and South Africa, Australia, and across Europe. And these people are seeing the same type of things, and they're having the same type of experiences. The different religions, I spoke with experts in Islam and Buddhism and Hinduism and again, the American Indian shamanism and Christianity, and they've all got these shadow beings as part of their belief system. So, I mean, given all the different types of people separated by geography, there's got to be something to it.
Well, I found that the Islamic explanation was really pretty compelling because there's a tradition in Islam, as you know, of the jinn, from which we get the word genie. Mm-hmm. And the jinn, to Muslims, is an actual race of beings. They're not ghosts, and they're not demons exactly. They can even be Muslim. I mean, you can have Muslim jinn, you can have, infidel jinn, basically. So they do exist. They're a race of beings. They live sort of in the same dimension as we do, and sort of not. And it seems to be the closest explanation from a religious perspective of what these things might be.
Right, and I thought that was pretty fascinating, especially the if you are an infidel, everybody has a jinn attached to them, and if you are not Muslim and when you die, the jinn will sit on your grave and laugh at you throughout eternity. So it's just nothing I'm looking forward to.
That sounds pretty much like pretty much sums up the character of these creatures that you're talking about. They're kind of nasty and cynical. Well, I mean, the physical descriptions that you've given, that they're human and not quite, that there's something distorted about them, fits in with a lot of the drawings and paintings and iconography of demons that have been come down to us from at least since the Middle Ages and not earlier, if not earlier. If you look at some of the old drawings of demons, all the various names, and I won't mention them on the air because I don't want to give anybody nightmares, but you will see that these are human figures that have been distorted, that there's something about the distorted human figure that calls to mind something evil and malevolent. I mean, there seems to be a connection there with this experience and with all of these drawings that I've seen throughout my life of doing research in the subject. One of the things that I noted was that demons always seem to look like people, except that there's something vaguely wrong about the way they're put together. They may have, as you said, really long arms or really long legs, or be 7 feet tall, move awkwardly, have misshapen faces, or something out of whack. Not completely wholly out of whack, not like some Lovecraftian monster with tentacles, just humanoid, almost human, not quite. That seems to be the description of demons according to the Judeo-Christian literature that I've seen.
Right. Yes, they definitely fit into that category. Mainly, like I said, the Catholic Archbishop I interviewed really drove that point home to me. And there was also a case out of Georgia, a small town in Georgia, where a man and his wife they had just gone to bed, and his wife screamed that there was somebody in the room, and he pulled his handgun out of the nightstand and flicked the light on and couldn't find anybody, and then he said from that point on his wife started behaving extremely oddly. He went to look in the closet, and he said she said to him, "No, he's not in there," and then laughed in a laugh he really hadn't heard before. And throughout the coming months, her personality changed to where she would say to him, "I've never loved you. You're completely worthless. I'm getting a divorce from you." And then she took out an insurance policy on him and tried to kill him. Eventually, she left and they got a divorce. But he said when she left, they had an argument, and he saw something, a shadow being, start to come out of her face. As she was very, very angry, and then it was sort of sucked back in, and she left. So he feels that night that she was possessed by a demonic entity.
Wow. Well, on that note, we're going to have to take another break, but we'll come right back in a few moments with Jason Offutt, the author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. This is Peter Levenda for Dreamland, and we'll be right back.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. We go deeper.
This is Peter Levenda for Dreamland, talking to Jason Offutt, the author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us, a book that's just been published by Anomalous Books. Before we get much further, Jason, I just wanted to ask you, where can people get this book?
They can get it at anomalousbooks.com. You can pick it up from Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Okay, great. And for anybody listening, I hardly recommend it. If you like horror stories and you like spooky stuff, this is definitely right up there. It's just story after story after story of people, their real experiences, their real encounters with these shadow people. Just before the break, we were talking about a very strange, bizarre experience of the pastor who saw his wife basically possessed by one of these things. What other spooky stuff? I mean, what have people told you? I mean, people must have been really pouring their heart out to you about these things. What really sticks out in your mind?
Well, one is a story of a guy from England, from London. He had just rented a new flat, and two of the things that he noticed was that where he had to put the TV, where the cable box was. And where he had to put the couch, the carpet was kind of worn in between the TV and the couch. He didn't really think much of it. And then he noticed that the electrical outlet in the kitchen, which was right behind the couch, was unscrewed, and it was hanging on the wires. Again, he really didn't think much about it. But he noticed, as he would be sitting watching TV in the months to come, with the lights off at night, that he would see in a reflection of the TV when the TV went to commercial and the screen kind of went black that there were lights behind him and shadow beings standing behind him, and he would turn around and see no lights and he would see no shadow beings, and he would take to turning the TV off and going up to the TV to stare into it, and he thought at one point, I'm going to wear the carpet out if I keep doing this. And of course, the carpet was worn out from the previous person who lived there. And he also thought about the lights. If it was somebody in the next flat, messing with me, they would have to do it through the electric outlet. And of course, the electric outlet was unplugged. So he realized that the person in the apartment before him was doing exactly the same thing he was. Kind of sounded like a Twilight Zone episode to me. But as he was sitting there, night after night, he started noticing that these shadow people moved from standing behind him to sitting next to him. And one night, when he finally got fed up with this, he noticed that through the night, one of them sitting next to him kept scooching closer, and he felt it was trying to push him into the other one.
Wow.
And that scared him enough to where he stopped the routine he was in.
So they cast reflections. Am I correct in assuming this, that these shadow people actually have reflections that they cast?
Yes, in this case and in a few others, another one where a person saw a reflection, which is going to raise a whole other question with you. She was, during the daytime, was sitting on her couch watching TV and noticed a shadow person in the TV screen. And she turned the TV off and looked and noticed that this person was standing outside. And she looked outside the window, and it was standing by a telephone pole. And she said she felt that it was staring at the house next door. And the next day, the woman who lived in the house next door died. So, yes, there are a number of different cases that I've had where they have cast reflections. And like I said, with this one of the other explanations for shadow people is that they're omens. Right,
that they're actually, in this case, it would seem to be, right. Standing in front of the house in which a person dies the following day. But that's an old story, sort of, that we've heard in other cases before, a ghost or some sort of spiritual entity appearing somewhere where someone's about to die. But I mean, what's fascinating to me is that they have this ability to cast reflections. I mean, this is a physical entity. I mean, this is physical. If you're casting a reflection, you're physical. I mean, there's no way around it, right? This is not a mental state that you're in. You're not in a fugue state or night terrors or anything like that. If you see a reflection in a television screen or in a mirror, then obviously this thing, whatever it is casting a reflection, which automatically means it's a physical entity.
Right. It's there, and it's the light's not passing through it. It is a physical entity. Absolutely.
Well, this is very, very strange stuff. When I was reading your book, a memory came to me, not of a personal encounter. Although it's another story about the Ouija board and all the rest of it, which I did in my youth as well. We had a lot of paranormal results from that, but not a shadow people or a shadow person type result. But I was thinking about a book that I came across in a secondhand bookstall in Southeast Asia. It was 10 years ago. The last place you'd expect to find it, and it was a book by Ingo Swann, and it was called Penetration. And Ingo Swann, if anybody, listeners, recall this name, he was involved with the Sanford Research Institute, SRI, out in California, where they were doing a lot of paranormal research. Ingo Swann was part of a team that was doing all sorts of things, remote viewing, all sorts of paranormal research. He was, I think, briefly involved also with Uri Geller, the famous Israeli psychic. And Swann was talking about entities in this very small, privately printed book that he had put out, that you would see in the street or you would see in public places, and all you had to do was sit there and basically ask them to show up or leave yourself open to them, and then you would see them passing by, and you would have this definite reaction that this thing passing by was not human. It was humanoid, but not quite human. And this could be in broad daylight. It didn't have to be in the middle of the night. It could be anywhere under any kind of circumstance. And it brought that to mind, and he was writing about it from the alien point of view, saying these were aliens among us. And you bring that out in your book as well, for the possibility that these are aliens, basically extraterrestrials. Do you think there's any possibility of looking at it from that point of view?
Well, yeah, that's why I included that in the book, because a number of people are fairly convinced that they are extraterrestrials, but why appear as these shadow beings? Why not appear as grays or other types of reported extraterrestrial entities? And I've gotten a couple of explanations. They're trying to scare you to death. They're trying to hide who they are. A couple of people I interviewed had stories of seeing beyond the shadow, and they saw reptilian skin. They saw clawed three-fingered hand. They saw the reptilian eyes of these things, and knew that the entity that they were seeing was not happy that they'd been found out. So I mean, there are a number of explanations that I've gotten like that.
Well, we're coming close to the end of our show today, and I think I want to ask. I mean, if any of our listeners encounter one of these things, what is your first level of advice? I mean, what do you recommend they do? Should they look forward to an encounter like this? Should they run screaming from it, or how should they handle it?
Probably run screaming into the night.
Okay.
I would not welcome an encounter like this, just because of so many negative encounters that I've received. I've got a chapter in the book about how to get rid of them, and most of it has to do with being vocal, whether that's praying out loud or screaming at the thing to leave or laughing in its face. Those things have seemed to work. If you're able to do that and you're not too terrified, that might be what I'd suggest. Or, again, like you said, run.
Well, so there's nothing we really can learn from these things, but you don't recommend cultivating a relationship with the shadow people, I imagine.
I don't think they'd be very good dinner companions.
Wow. Okay. I think that pretty much sums it up. Jason, it's been great talking to you, and it's great talking about this subject. It is very spooky. It's very interesting to me. It seems to cut across different genres of experience, different types, categories of experience. I recommend anyone listening who has an interest in this. I mean, Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us by Jason Offutt. As he said, you can get it the usual suspects, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly from Anomalous Books at anomalousbooks.com. Jason, it's great talking to you. Keep us informed of your research. If anything else comes up about this, I'd be really interested to learn more about it, especially if there's any extended contacts with these creatures of any kind. Thanks very much, Jason.
All right, hey Peter, it's been terrific. Thank you very much for having me on.